Welcome to Late Night Horror Stories and True Crime. Tonight, we journey deep into the dark corners of America's forgotten woods, where something ancient still crawls in the Appalachian shadows, where a woman's quiet night in her van becomes a deadly game of silence, and where one man's solo camping trip leads to a chilling discovery in the pines. These are the stories they warn you about. Crawlers, Don't Let the Dog Bark, and The Thing in the Pines. Turn down the lights. Lock your doors. Let the silence settle. Because the woods are listening. It started like any other trip for the four of them. Mark, Deshawn, Kenny and Brian. College friends turned weekend warriors. All in their early 30s now, they didn't see each other often. Life had gotten busy. But once or twice a year, they'd pick a spot, hike in, and camp off-grid for a few nights with a cooler full of beer and stories from the past. This time, Brian suggested a place he'd read about in a Reddit thread, somewhere near Seneca Rocks, West Virginia. Isolated, rugged, gorgeous, and best of all, mostly untouched. That's real Appalachia, Brian said as he drove the final miles of winding forest road. No tourists, no park rangers, just woods. They parked the truck and hiked in nearly 2 miles, lugging a canvas wall tent with a built-in stove and enough meat to feed an army. Autumn had settled in. Crisp air, the faint rot of fallen leaves, the occasional breeze through a dying canopy. By dusk, they'd pitched the tent in a low valley surrounded by dense timber. Deshawn chopped firewood while Kenny set up the stove. Mark cracked open the first beer, already hungry. The smell of grilled steaks, butter-fried potatoes, and sizzling onions filled the tent, mixing with smoke and pine. They laughed hard, told old stories, and toasted to brotherhood, the mountains echoing with their voices. Then they heard it. A sharp, sudden hiss. Everyone went still. "You hear that?" Mark asked, his voice half a whisper. "Probably just a possum," Brian said, but he stood and unzipped the tent flap anyway. They stepped out into the darkness. Cold air hit them hard. The fire's glow barely reached the tree line. That's when Kenny said, "Something's out there." They all looked. Just beyond the ring of shadows stood a figure, not clearly human, hunched, still. Its eyes caught the firelight, reflective and low to the ground, like an animal's. Then it was gone. The woods swallowed it in an instant. They didn't sleep much that night. "We should leave tomorrow," Deshawn said. Brian shook his head. "It's probably some drifter or weird animal. We hike in the morning, pack out in the afternoon. Easy." Morning came gray and quiet. No bird song, just wind moving through trees that looked a little too still. They set out with light packs and took the uphill trail. Mark led the way, using his machete to clear overgrowth. The deeper they went, the worse the woods felt, older somehow, like the trees were watching. Then they heard it again. Close, too close. This time it echoed, above them, around them, beneath them. Brian's hand went to the axe on his belt. "Back to camp," Kenny said, looking pale. "Now." They turned around, moving fast. That's when Deshawn tripped, his foot catching under an exposed root. He hit the ground hard. "Shit, my ankle," he gasped, grabbing at it. "I can't walk." Mark knelt beside him. "It's twisted bad. Maybe sprained." The light was fading, fast. There was no way they could carry him out through the brush in the dark. They had no choice. They had to go back to the tent. The fire was long out when they returned. Mark got it going again with trembling hands while Brian helped Deshawn limp inside. Kenny cooked sausages on the stove, the scent of meat cutting through the cold like a lifeline. They barely ate. No one spoke much. They all heard the hissing now, intermittent, distant, closer, then gone again. That night they took turns on watch. At 2:47 a.m., Kenny sat on the stool with a lantern in one hand and a hatchet in the other, his ears tuned for the sound. Closer this time. He leaned toward the tent wall. It sounded like breathing, mixed with that same damn hiss. He woke the others. Mark grabbed the flashlight and lifted the flap, and then they saw them. Two shapes, crouched low near the edge of the woods. They were humanoid, barely. Pale, hairless skin, joints that bent wrong. One of them had fingers too long, dragging in the dirt. The other twitched violently like it was malfunctioning. They weren't standing. They were crawling, on all fours, twisted and grotesque, like humans who had forgotten how to be human. The light hit one of their faces. It recoiled. The skin was blistered, sagging, the mouth pulled wide into a toothless grin. Its eyes were sunken black pits. Then the other one screeched, high-pitched and wet. The woods came alive with sound, movement fast, several shadows crawling through the trees. They circled the tent. One dragged its nails along the canvas wall, slow and deliberate. Others moved erratically, scampering over logs, twitching like insects. Brian held the axe tight. Mark braced the stovepipe with a piece of firewood. Kenny gripped the hatchet and stared at the tent flap. Deshawn sat on the cot, whispering something over and over again. They ain't right. They ain't human. They ain't human. The hiss grew louder, more violent, as if something ancient was seething. One of them pounced at the flap, its shadow rising, then recoiling as Brian swung the axe through the opening. Another began chewing through the canvas from the side. Kenny stabbed at it. The blade sank into something fleshy. A shriek followed, gurgling, then silence. "Now!" Mark shouted. "We run now!" But Deshawn couldn't move. Mark hesitated. "I'm not leaving him!" Kenny shoved a burning log out the flap. The woods lit up for just a second, and they saw them. 4, maybe 5, all crawling, all watching, their heads twitching like broken dolls. The firelight danced in their slick pale skin. Then they charged. Brian screamed. Kenny hacked wildly. Mark stood his ground, until one of the crawlers burst through the canvas wall, tackling him to the floor. Its breath was foul, its mouth open unnaturally wide as it hissed inches from his face. Brian grabbed the stove and smashed it down on its skull. Black fluid sprayed across the cot. "Go!" Mark screamed. Kenny and Brian half-dragged, half-carried Deshawn into the trees, leaving behind the tent, still lit with firelight, now overrun with shadows. They ran for hours until sunrise, until the hissing faded, until the forest looked normal again. They didn't stop until they reached the truck. Deshawn never walked again. He didn't talk much either after that night. Mark moved to Florida. Brian went back to Pennsylvania. Kenny left the country entirely. None of them ever spoke of it publicly. Who would believe them? They tried to report it once. The ranger who met them said, "Bears get big up here, especially if they're sick." But when Brian drove back a month later just to see, he found no trace of the tent, no fire pit, no boot prints, nothing except claw marks on a tree, and a single pale finger lying in the leaves. Jessie knew better than to post her location online. She was an experienced solo traveler, 35 and sharp, with a good head for danger and a lean, tan body hardened by years of road living. Her van, a white 2006 Dodge Sprinter, was her home and fortress. Inside it were blackout curtains, pepper spray, a taser, a mounted flashlight, and a tire iron she kept wedged behind the front seat. Her closest companion was her 90-pound German Shepherd, Duke. That weekend, Jessie planned a quick stealth camp along a quiet pull-off near Olympic National Forest in Washington. It was off-season, and the road was mostly empty. That meant fewer people, less noise, and more room to breathe. She parked late in the afternoon and checked her surroundings. A gravel turnout by a forested lake, maybe half a mile from the nearest trailhead. She walked Duke, cooked a simple dinner of rice and eggs, then watched the sun disappear behind a curtain of evergreens. By 9 p.m., she was in bed, tucked beneath a sleeping bag in the back of the van, Duke curled at her feet. The forest outside was still, just the occasional creak of a pine or the rustle of branches overhead. She fell asleep, with her hand resting on the dog's back. An hour later, her sleep was disturbed by a sound. Tap. She woke. Her eyes snapped open. Tap, tap. She didn't move, just listened. The sound was soft, subtle, like fingernails against the metal side panel of the van. Duke raised his head but didn't bark. His ears twitched. He let out a low growl. Shh, she whispered, reaching slowly for the pepper spray near her pillow. She leaned back, heart pounding. She'd parked so the front of the van faced the lake and the back faced the woods. The taps had come from the driver's side, the side exposed to the trees. Another tap, then a slow drag of something across the metal, like fingernails or claws. Duke didn't growl again. He was frozen, watching the side wall like he could see through it. Jessie stayed still. And then, a shape passed in front of the windshield. Not close, not fast, just gliding by. No flashlight, no phone glow, just a tall figure, silhouetted briefly by the moonlight on the lake, then gone. She didn't sleep again that night. Around 1 a.m., she heard the softest crunch of gravel. Then again, on the other side of the van. Whoever or whatever it was circling. She gripped Duke's collar to keep him still. He didn't bark. He just stared at the wall with a look Jessie had never seen before. Not anger, not alertness, fear. She reached forward and very slowly peeled back the curtain over the front windshield just an inch. The lot was empty. Forest everywhere, nothing visible. Then, flash. Something moved at the edge of her vision, low to the ground, skittering across the tree line. She let the curtain fall. No more sleep, just silence, endless and heavy. She turned off the lantern, then the cabin lights. Darkness closed in. The dog never made a sound. By dawn, Jessie had made a decision. She was leaving. She dressed quickly, brewed a cup of coffee with a shaking hand, and stepped out to walk Duke, but only a few feet from the van. That's when she saw them. Boot prints, not hers. Too large, deep, like someone had been crouching, moving slowly. And not just one pair, two. They led from the woods to the driver's side and around the van, more than once. She turned and spotted something else. A small pile of dog treats, placed neatly on a flat stone near the passenger side. She hadn't brought treats. She grabbed Duke and got back inside, fast. As she turned the ignition, her stomach dropped. The front tire was flat, slashed. She cursed, opened her phone. No signal. The road out was long, and she wasn't walking it alone. Not with Duke limping from an old leg injury and not with them still out there. She grabbed the tire iron and got to work. Duke stood watch, ears up, body rigid. It took her 30 minutes to finish. She kept looking over her shoulder. The woods were too quiet. Even the birds seemed to be gone. She got in, locked the doors, and drove, slowly at first, then faster, gravel popping against the undercarriage. She didn't stop until she was 20 miles down the road and parked outside a gas station. Only then did she breathe again. That night, safe in a Walmart parking lot, surrounded by lights and people. She did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. Duke wouldn't leave her side. The next day, curiosity got the better of her. She posted in a private Facebook group for solo van travelers. She explained what happened. Within hours, she got dozens of responses. Happened to me outside Port Angeles. They stalked me for 2 nights. I heard the same tapping. Woke up to symbols drawn in mud on my side window. Never camp without cell service. Ever. There's something in those woods that watches, and it knows who's alone. Someone DM'd her, a local. He only wrote 1 line. You were lucky he didn't bark. Jesse didn't understand. Then the man replied again. They only come in when the dog barks, when they know where you are. Jessie never went back to the Pacific Northwest. She started camping near truck stops and trailheads with 24-hour lights. Bought a GPS tracker, a satellite phone, but sometimes when she parks far from town and the wind is still and the woods are quiet, Duke still growls, low, warning her. And she never tells him to stop, because she understands now. Welcome to a story that begins not in fear, but in peace. A man alone in the woods, searching for solitude, and yet by the time the sun set, something ancient had woken, and it was watching. Jeremy Hughes wasn't the reckless type. He didn't chase adrenaline or tempt fate for Instagram likes. He was a quiet, introverted 32-year-old IT worker who found freedom in the woods and peace in silence. He'd been stealth camping for about 2 years, mostly short trips, never more than a weekend. He followed the rules of the craft. Stay hidden, leave no trace, and never overstay your welcome. He had his pack dialed in, a bivy sack instead of a tent, a compact sleeping pad, freeze-dried meals, a small axe, and a headlamp with red light mode. Most importantly, no campfires. He knew how to blend in. His latest trip took him to a stretch of forest just off an abandoned set of train tracks outside Iron River, Michigan. It was late October, cold enough to deter weekend warriors, but not cold enough to freeze. Jeremy found that perfect window between summer tourists and deer hunters. Just quiet woods, empty space, and long shadows cast by naked trees. The forest smelled of damp leaves and moss. The wind carried the earthy aroma of pine resin and rot. He parked his Subaru just shy of the forest access gate, tossed on his pack, and hiked in along the forgotten track, boots crunching over gravel and leaf litter. By 4:30 p.m., Jeremy found his spot. He'd veered a quarter mile off the tracks and settled into a shallow ridge surrounded by towering pines. It was the kind of place that muted all noise. No road traffic, no cell signal, just the constant hush of wind through needles. He ate a quick dinner of rice and tuna from a pouch, washed it down with a swig of water, and unrolled his sleeping gear. The temperature dropped fast, shadows lengthening, the sun bleeding out behind the tree line. He slipped into his bivy sack just after 7 p.m., long before full dark. The last thing he remembered before drifting off was the soft hoot of an owl, somewhere high above him. Jeremy woke to the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Crunch, pause, crunch. He sat up fast, heart thudding. His bivvy sack zipped down with a quiet hiss and he reached for his headlamp. Silence. He waited, breath held. Nothing. He told himself it was probably a deer, or maybe the wind shifting leaves. But something was off. There had been a pattern to the sound, slow and deliberate, as though whoever or whatever had been walking had paused, listening, matching him. Jeremy turned on his headlamp, setting it to the dim red mode. The forest bathed in crimson glow, and for a moment everything looked alien. Twisted branches, dark bark, long skeletal arms of pine. He circled the bivvy sack slowly, scanning the perimeter. No glowing eyes, no movement, no sign of anything. Still, the hair on his arms stood up. He took a deep breath. Probably an animal, he whispered, more for himself than anyone else. Big squirrel. Porcupine. He climbed back into the bivvy and zipped up, but he didn't fall asleep. That's when he heard it again. Crunch, crunch. This time it was unmistakable. It was pacing him. Moving when he moved. He shifted his arm, silence. He tapped his foot. One crunch in reply, a mimic. Something out there mimicking his movement. His stomach turned. He unzipped the bivvy fully and pulled out his knife. A small, fixed blade he kept for emergencies. Then he did something against his better judgment. He whispered, "Hello?" Crunch, 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 closer. Jeremy backed up against a tree. The sound stopped. Then he heard something worse than footsteps. Breathing. Not the panting of an animal. Human breathing, shallow, labored, just on the other side of the trees. "Back the fuck off," he shouted, voice trembling. Then silence. For what felt like hours, he didn't move. Finally, when no sound returned, Jeremy retreated to his bivvy sack and forced himself to lay still, knife in hand. He didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, Jeremy packed up. He didn't eat, didn't take time to make coffee. He just wanted out. As he made his way back to the tracks, he paused. Something shiny caught his eye, tucked beneath a log maybe 10 feet from where he'd been sleeping. He knelt down and found a discarded beer can. Old, rusted. But nearby was something fresher, a strip of blue tarp and a broken hunting knife. Odd. He followed the trail a little deeper into the trees and found a makeshift camp. No tent, no gear, just bones, animal bones. Arranged in strange patterns, circles, X-shapes. One was hanging from a tree by sinew. In the center, a patch of scorched ground, like a fire had been made but long ago. Melted plastic was fused with the soil. A piece of cardboard sat near the ash. Jeremy walked closer. There was writing on it. "I see you," written in Sharpie. Jeremy turned and ran, back at the car. He found something that made his blood run cold. A smudge on the driver's side window, greasy, as if someone had leaned close and breathed on the glass. And beneath it, faint finger streaks, long fingers. He opened the car and found everything inside exactly where he left it, except his spare boots. They were gone. In their place, a small strip of animal hide, coiled like a ribbon, soaked in something dark. He drove without stopping. The trees on either side of the road seemed to lean in, like watchers bidding him farewell. The wind howled through cracks in the windows, a high-pitched note that sounded almost like a whisper. Jeremy never went back to Iron River. He stopped stealth camping altogether. He posted anonymously on a wilderness forum, detailing what happened. The post was taken down within a day, but others had seen it. One user messaged him directly. "You found the bone camp. You're lucky you left before nightfall. They don't all stay human out there." Another added, My cousin found that camp in 2016. He didn't leave. His body was found hanging in a tree, cleaned like a deer carcass. Cops blamed a bear, but bears don't write in Sharpie. Jeremy moved to an apartment in Milwaukee. He kept blackout curtains and didn't go out after dark. But sometimes, just sometimes, he wakes up and finds his dog staring at the window, growling low. And once, just once, he swore he saw a boot print in the mud outside, one that matched the boots he'd lost. Thank you for joining us this evening on Late Night Horror Stories and True Crime. If tonight's stories made you think twice about the woods, the road, or that sound just outside your window, you're not alone. We invite you to hit the like button, subscribe for more tales of terror, and share this video with someone who thinks they're brave enough to watch alone. And remember, some campsites never go cold, and some things don't knock before they come in. Sleep well, if you can.